Welcome to Whiskey Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 936 for March 23rd, 2022. In just a moment, we'll have the Happy Hour Live webcast from the other night with my guests Becky Paskin, Scott Brunow from the Scotch Test Dummies and the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and joining us for the first time, cocktail and spirits writer Camper English. But first, we have some breaking news to report. Tuesday, the U.S. and Great Britain resolved their differences over steel and aluminum tariffs. As a result, the UK's 25% retaliatory tariff on imports of bourbon and other American whiskies will end in June. That tariff has cost U.S. whiskey makers millions of dollars in lost export sales over the last 4 years, along with raising the price of American whiskeys for UK whiskey lovers. We'll have more on this story on this weekend's episode of Whiskey Cast. Thanks as always to Redbreast and Dewar's, our presenting sponsors. They make our live shows every Friday afternoon possible, along with the segment sponsors on each week's Whiskey Cast podcast: Sagamore Spirit, Scarabus, The Delmore, Catoctin Creek, Mortlock, and Writer's Tears. Let's start off with Becky Paskin, our pal from OurWhisky.com and the Our Whisky Foundation. Becky, first of all, you've had a busy week because you launched the Our Whisky Foundation, right? You are muted, Becky.
Hi. Oh my goodness. 2 years. I think that's the first time I've been told that I've been muted as well. What an entrance.
It happens.
Hello.
So you're tired, and it's time zone differences and all that, and it's late over there. So what have you been up to with the foundation?
Yes, so it's been around 4 years since Our Whisky first launched. And so back in 2018, International Women's Day, Our Whisky was founded as a kind of social media movement to champion the modern face of whiskey and to really just highlight the diverse faces of people who make whiskey and drink whiskey. And over the last 4 years, we've seen a lot of development and kind of realised that a couple of Our Whisky festivals deep, we raised a lot of money for charity. We raised over £25,000 during the COVID crisis for charity through doing virtual tastings, and kind of feel like now is a good time for an evolution of Our Whisky. So we've kind of evolved into two companies. One, Our Whisky still exists and is kind of living now as a subscription club based in the UK. We've still got that message of diversity and inclusion right at the very core. So we are curating whiskies in a really accessible way for people who may be new to whiskey or just want to explore a little bit more in a really safe, welcoming, warm environment. And then at the same time, I've also founded a non-profit organisation called the Our Whisky Foundation. And that really is designed to support, empower and recognise women working in the global whiskey industry. And a proportion of the profits from the subscription club will go to the foundation. And really with the foundation, what we're doing is just trying to help women in the whiskey industry develop in their careers, help discuss how important diversity and inclusion is with the industry, just try to help move the conversation forward. And we've got some amazing initiatives, some amazing partners lined up. And yeah, it's really, really exciting and very busy period at the moment.
What's the next step for the foundation? What do you do besides, or let me put it this way, how do you get to the point where we talk about diversity and inclusion on a year-round basis rather than just during March for International Women's Month or February for Black History Month or June for Pride Month for the LGBTQ plus community? How do we get to the point where we talk about diversity and make it stick on a year-round basis?
Yeah, so there's a few initiatives that we're doing with the foundation. So I kind of feel like to really tackle this idea of inclusion within the industry needs a two-pronged approach. One is speaking with consumers and showing from the inside out, a diverse face of whiskey drinkers and whiskey makers. So we'll be encouraging whiskey producers. So all of our supporters will be signing up to a code of conduct, in that they will be promising that they're going to be committing to a more diverse face of whiskey drinkers within their marketing. Currently, it still is very heavily male dominated, as we saw with the social media report that we released last year. There will be another one coming this year as well. In terms of initiatives, we already have launched our mentorship program. So we are encouraging women who work across the entire whiskey industry to apply for our mentorship program. We've got some amazing mentors lined up as well. People like Davil Gandhi and Rachel Barry, Nicola Risk from Macallan has signed up. We've got Ryan Chettiawardana, Mr. Lion, legendary bartender. Such a massive list of people who are just ready and waiting to help women develop their careers and reach their goals. We're also later this year going to be launching a qualifications and internship program as well. So helping women, again, this is a global initiative, helping women to gain qualifications and then offering them internships within organisations so they can discover what career opportunities are available to them. We've also, there's just so much going on. We're hoping to recognise more women with an award ceremony later on in the year too. I think there is so much we can do year round. It shouldn't just be confined to International Women's Day or March or even Black History Month. It's a year round initiative. And actually speaking with a lot of companies, it's really, it's so positive that every large organisation is really devoted to pushing the needle on this. And they've got some amazing initiatives year round. We may not see it as consumers outwardly. Maybe that's a job for the foundation so that we can make marketing more inclusive, but certainly from within organisations, there's a lot of stuff going on, which is super exciting.
And as Dave Cute points out, Becky Paskin is a badass, and we should all be excited. Happy Friday. Thanks for the comment, Dave. Let's bring in our pal now, Camper English, from alcademics.com. And Camper, tell us what you've been up to lately, because your specialty is in the cocktail world and the cocktails and spirits.
It sure is. So as you know, I just announced my next book is coming out in July, and I sort of told the world on Twitter yesterday about it to share the news. So and now I can share it with you. My book is called Doctors and Distillers, the remarkable medicinal history of beer, wine, spirits, and cocktails. And that's its title in the United States. It actually has a different publisher in the UK where it's called The Perfect Tonic with the same subtitle. Oh. And it goes all the way back to Egyptian times and washing wounds with beer, all the way through modern times with some dangerous cocktail ingredients that people might be putting in drinks and making their own tonic water to their own detriment sometimes, things like that. Along the way, we look at how alchemy produced distillation and how we use the term water of life, eau de vie, every day, at least the three of us here do. And but what that really meant at the time, they thought they had found the universal medicine. They were like, we did it, fam. We've distilled wine into the very elixir of life, the active soul of the universe, the perfect medicine, liquid gold. Turns out it's still pretty good, but not that good. And we go from there into more specific uses for all different sorts of spirits.
Cures a lot of the ills that ail us.
What's that? There's a lot of what?
Cures a lot of the ills that ail us sometimes.
It sure does. It's curing some for me right now. And,
what's in your glass, Camper?
Well, I'm having some Woodinville bourbon right now. It was close when I realized we were about to go live. Reached around and found the closest bottle.
Becky, what do you have?
I too did the same thing. I've been really dipping into a DIY blend that I've been playing about with, but I thought I better have something actual to show you rather than just some nonsense I've been playing with. So I just dug to the back of the shelf and grabbed this Glenrothes Manx Reserve. There's not a huge amount left in the bottle, and it's been open a while, so I really need to finish it. So
we won't expect you to finish it during this webcast.
It's a lot of whiskey. Although I will be going to bed after this. So it is okay. I don't have to work the rest of the afternoon like you two.
Yeah, and let's bring in our third guest, Scott Brunow from the Scotch Test Dummies and the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Scott had me on the other night on the Society's monthly web stream to talk about their new releases for this month. And I'm drinking one of those, cask number 9.217, a 17-year-old Space Cider that comes from a distillery with a bit of an alliterative nickname or alliterative name. Glenn is the first one. You can figure out the second one from there if you know the codes. How are you tonight, Scott?
Feel free to say it. We're not on the official channel here, but
Glenn Grant.
Could have been Glengarry.
What?
Could have been Glengarry.
No, it's a Glenn Grant.
Okay.
Glenn Grant. Yeah. But so I got Redbreast Loose Stout. Actually, I've got some green tea. It was tea time. So I started with tea, and I've got Redbreast Loose Stout in my glass and a couple of other Irish whiskeys on deck. And then that same one, the 9.217 mark that you have.
And Willem Killian is joining us from South Africa. He's a member of our latest Whiskey Club of the month. Good evening, Mark, and all you good whiskey folk. Envious desk for sure. And Willem, just to let you know, I shipped out the glassware yesterday, so your Whiskey Cast Glencairns are on the way. And let's hope that they make it to South Africa in one piece. And Camper jumped out for just a second, just as we had another comment from, there we go, Camper's back.
Sorry.
And we had a comment from Dave Kuhn. He has a couple of whiskey fan doctor friends from whom your book will be a great gift.
Excellent. Thank you. I was trying to log in to answer a question, and someone was asking about the publisher that it was on. And in the United States, that's on Penguin, and in the UK on HarperCollins.
And, of course, they don't communicate with each other in the U.S., and so we could have just one edition with one title, right?
They could, but, the people in England need all those extra U's put in the words. The flavor.
Graham Fraser wants to know if the three of you are venturing back into the real world of whiskey and attending live events yet. We just got word today that Whiskey Live London is on for the end of May.
Yeah, I hope to attend that, but the end of May is also around the time where we have Campbelltown Festival, Isla Festival, Highland Whiskey Festival. So hopefully there's an opportunity to get back to London to attend it. But I mean, we've really had whiskey events going on. The whiskey show was on in October last year. So things have been sort of up and running here for quite a while. In fact, in the UK, we haven't got any restrictions anymore for COVID. So everything is apparently back to normal, even though COVID rates are soaring currently. We're just, it's the good old British stiff upper lip and just ignore it and carry on.
Well,
here in San
Francisco, we really have just opened everything with dropping proof of vaccination to get inside restaurants and places now. So all of the cocktail bars have released new menus like this week, and or new bars are opening. So there's a lot more indoor drinking than I've been doing in the past couple of years. All of a sudden,
that's got to be exciting because it's got a whole bunch of new places for you to go check out, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I love hitting new bars and bars in general. Old bars are good too.
Scott, what about in the Midwest?
Things have pretty much been opened up around here for a while. Now, the SMWS just started in-person events at the 1st of March. Just opened back up and got everything going again. Unfortunately for me, I'm like the YouTube guy, so I get stuck, at the computer wrangling everything around instead of being able to attend those good in-person events.
I know I just hit the road last week for the first time since last fall. Spent a couple of days at Castle and Key Distillery in Kentucky, and we'll have some of that story on the show this weekend. But I'm just starting to get to the point now where I'm ready to get out and see people again, because it's been literally 2 years of sitting here behind this desk now, but sitting at that bar table that I sat at for the last 2 years doing these shows, and I'm ready to get out and see you guys again. It's been way too long.
Yep. And now we have the awkward exchange of, is it a handshake or is it a fist bump? But it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and of course, hugging is still out of the question completely.
Yeah, it's rare. You got to think twice about hugging. That's
I think
second base.
I think though now, I mean, people don't have a problem. Like if you do shake hands and then you go right to the hand sanitizer, it's not offensive anymore. It used to be if you'd shake hands and went to the hand sanitizer, you'd offend somebody. Now it's expected.
I feel like we're living in a different world over here because we've been doing hugs and things for a long time now. But I kind of wonder whether we've prematurely just moved away from all these restrictions to cover up failings from our awful government, to be honest. So opening things up and getting back to normal is just a way of changing the news. But hugging and shaking hands has been part of the cause for a really long time.
Imagine the British being the least repressed of all of us.
Imagine that.
I kid, of course. Camper, I wanted to pick your brain about this new trend we're seeing in cocktails towards these so-called RTDs or ready-to-drink cocktails. I've got one here, and I know you don't have it, but this is one that Brown-Forman just released in a few states in the Midwest about with an Old Forester ginger citrus old-fashioned. And I'm going to try this for the first time. I've had it sitting in the refrigerator, but what's your take on this whole trend towards these premixed cocktails?
Well, I think there are, I separate them into bottled cocktails as you're drinking now and canned RTD cocktails, usually carbonated, but also the canned ones are more likely to have a citrus component, which is usually the point of failure for all canned cocktails because it tastes like Rose's lime juice or aspirin or something like that when they're trying to preserve citrus. And so the bottled cocktails tend not to have too much of that aspect. Maybe there's some lemon zest oil in there or something that can last. But so they tend to taste, the old-fashioned Manhattan style. Those are often great out of the bottle. They tend to taste much better than a lot of the canned, particularly whiskey drinks.
Because those are basically just hard seltzers, right?
No, it used to be the case that those were always made with malt liquor for tax price reasons. But now everything is so expensive that you can just use real gin in your gin and tonic in the can. And that's been a big change that happened really starting just before COVID, and that producers are putting their names on the can. Now it's Jim Beam and Tanqueray and all the big brands want their own ready-to-drink 4-packs in the refrigerator section of liquor stores. And absolutely everybody is doing it. We went from nothing to 1,000%.
I know that these were popular in Australia and other places for years. Jack Daniels ships tankers of whiskey down to Australia to be bottled with Coke or to be canned with Coke and things like that. Dave Kuhn says Rock and Rye is as close as he's come to a bottled cocktail, good for beach trips when you want to fake an easy old-fashioned for groups. So there's a convenience there.
And it's medicine.
It's medicine. Yes. And a ready-made old-fashioned sounds better than a whiskey and Coke, at least, according to Willem in South Africa. I'm thinking this has to be a typo from our pal Whiskey Canuck. I'm not waiting for the festivals to come back, going to a Fiends and Family tasting. I'm assuming you either meant to say friends or you're going with your in-laws. Scott, what's your take on these? Because I know you're more of a purist when it comes to whiskey, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against cocktails. I just don't ever find myself going to them. Or making them myself outside. I'll mix a Bloody Mary here at the house or a Dirty Martini, which are probably my two favorite, non-whiskey drinks. But I wouldn't be against trying them. I guess I hadn't even realized they had kind of come to fruition or there was that many of them out there now. So, but I could see the bottled ones being better. To me, it always seems like alcoholic or liquor, type drinks always seem better out of glass than they do a can.
Yeah, and essentially it's the cocktails that would be, if we're looking at the difference between shaken and stirred, it's the stirred cocktails that come out of the bottle. And the more shaken style, which tend to be citrus forward and have juice or other fresh ingredients that we're going to find in a can. And those are harder to do. It's
why,
when you
why
find
is that, Campo? Why would you have those fresher ingredients in a can? Is it about preservation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's usually the pasteurization of the citrus, which, lime juice from a bottle tastes nothing like fresh squeezed lime. And no one's really solved that mystery, although I've tasted some that have been massive improvements to the lime flavored beers of old that we used to have to drink. So they're all getting better, a lot better. And it's good to see. And, the big trend just before COVID was portability in beverage. That was the supposedly the younger person's preferred drink format. So you can have a canned cocktail while you're at the electronic music festival, and you got to be able to walk with your beverage. Portability. And now that's come. It was important during COVID when people weren't able to go into bars so they could port it home.
We have a question from Dave Kuhn. Is there any truth to the medicinal benefits of a gin and tonic? I always find myself ordering one during air travel and cross my fingers.
At one time, tonic water was definitely medicinal. And if you look in cocktail books in the 1940s and 50s, the authors say, well, don't have more than 3 or 4 of these because the tonic water is medicine and you're going to get this terrible headache. It's called cinchonism, and you get tinnitus in your ears from having too much tonic water. Now the regulations have cut down on the maximum amount that you can put of quinine that you can put in your bottle. And so you don't have to worry about the negative effects. As far as the positive effects, there was actually a recent study. If you drank gin and tonic, would it have the amount of quinine that could prevent malaria? And they found that it does pretty much while you're drinking it, but no human being could keep drinking that much tonic water consistently to stave off malaria with commercial tonic these days.
As Becky has a glass of tonic water at her desk, right?
I do. Sorry, before we came on, Mark said, "Have you all got a drink ready?" And I was like, "Oh, I've got 4." I do. I have a bottle of water. I have a glass of tonic water. I actually find on the days during the week where I'm trying to cut back on drinking, but still really hanker for something that tastes great, I keep bottles of tonic water in the cupboard, and I just will have a glass of tonic water just because, and just get rid of the gin and not use that, and have a nice, refreshing, non-alcoholic option. And it's a bit like having a gin and tonic, but without the gin. Yeah. Anyway, I've not actually tried whiskey and tonic. I don't really fancy that tonight, so I'm not going to experiment. But yeah, although I was almost going to be a bit different. So, Mark, you're aware that I love playing about with my whiskey and putting weird and wonderful mixes in with my whiskey and sweets and all sorts of random fun stuff like that. So I actually do have some cream soda. Do you guys have cream soda in the US? You have cream soda. Okay. So I was going to put some cream soda and whiskey. Is phenomenal, by the way. If you've not tried it before, give it a go. And maybe with like a slice of lemon in there as well, just to cut through the vanilla. But it's stunning. Maybe try some. It'd be great with bourbon or grain Scotch whiskey as well.
But which one does it work well with?
So I've tried it with hedonism, Compass Box hedonism. It's fantastic with grain whiskey. You could also try it with bourbon, which will be a bit heavier. Just anything that's got like a lovely bourbon cask, vanilla kind of note to it would pair nicely. But you will need like a slice of lemon or something to just cut through. Otherwise, it's just very sweet and quite overwhelming. But it's a really lovely, sweet pick me up. Just a fun little treat to have.
And there is a bottled RTD of cream soda and bourbon on the U.S. market, and I forget the name offhand, and it was good stuff.
Oh, okay. You need to remember what it is and tell me, because I'd love to try it.
That would be an interesting combination. I'll have to try that with the vanilla and the vanilla cream soda. That would work well with the vanilla and the bourbon generally.
On the RTD trend, it's actually soaring quite nicely here in the UK. There's a lot of interest in bottled cocktails. A lot of bars are doing bottled cocktails to go. We're seeing some of the bigger bars. Taya in Elementary in London is doing a phenomenal job with their bottled cocktails. They do a fantastic old-fashioned, a maple old-fashioned. I think it's with Maker's Mark, and £1 from every cocktail is donated to Women's Aid as well. And their bottled cocktails are amazing, but then there are a lot of brands who are moving into the sector as well. So William Grant and Sons, who own Glenfiddich, have done a whole range of bottled cocktails too. So interestingly enough, their Glenfiddich-based cocktail they're calling a Scotch Manhattan. That's another trend at the moment we're seeing here is Scotch whisky brands calling their Rob Roy's Manhattans or Scotch Manhattans because it sounds more trendy and modern and moves away from the tartan imagery of a Rob Roy. But that's maybe a conversation for another day. But yeah, the whole RTD thing is really interesting. And today, actually, we had what felt like the first day of spring. So it was so beautiful and sunny, stunning throughout most of England. And I don't think it'll be too long before people are sitting out in parks again with their cans of whatever. Hopefully not hard seltzers, but actual decent canned or bottled cocktails, at least anyway.
We have a comment from Malt Mariners, I believe in Germany. As a whiskey nerd that has just recently been convinced to try whiskey cocktails like the Sazerac and Old Fashioned, to me, the magic of the bartender is part of the fun for me. And Camper, I think you've got to agree with that. There's still nothing like a well-made cocktail by a bartender who knows what they're doing.
For sure. It's worth the extra price to have it made by a person just for you. It's like someone cooking for you is different than getting takeout to have someone doing that. And the show is great. American bartenders are known for, big shaking moves and putting on quite the performance while they're making your drink. So that's, it makes it taste better, I think, as well. A lot different than pouring something out of a bottle and enjoying it. The drink is just as delicious technically, but maybe you're not going to enjoy it quite as much.
And there's usually not as good a story behind the bottled one.
True.
And Scott, you were Googling while we were talking. You found the bourbon and cream soda.
Yeah, Cardinal Spirits, or at least it's one. There were several articles on it. Kind of a khaki and a brown can.
Sounds
the
right.
red triangle on it. But Cardinal Spirits bourbon cream soda. Straight bourbon whiskey with vanilla cream soda. 8.5% ABV. You'd have to add a little bit more bourbon to that one, I think. Boost that up a little bit.
It's done for tax reasons.
Yeah.
And Cardinal Spirits, I'm familiar with. It's in my old college town of Bloomington, Indiana, where they're based out of at Indiana University. So even though we stunk at basketball this year, we do make good cocktails in Bloomington. So I love this comment from Dave Kuhn. Bartenders are the only ones who can oblige when you just say, surprise me. We have a question now for you, Scott, and probably for all of you as well. What's the most coveted Scotch Malt Whisky Society bottling? Are there some all-timers that people seem to hail as the best of the best?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. I mean, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, of course, has grown so much, especially over the last, 4, 5, 6 years. Before that, and even now, bottling is limited. When you look at most of the time, there's 200 and some bottles from a cask, and which ones are rare and still sealed out there that people have collected. I don't know. That's let's say a good question.
There's a 1.1 out there, hopefully, that somebody's looking at. And Graham Fraser's talking to H. Hemphill, just dipping his toe into Dingle Distillery whiskey, and it's a revelation. Dingle just became the 150th distillery, I believe, in the Scotch Malt Whisky Society lineup.
No, West Cork.
West Cork? Okay, I thought
West
it was Dingle,
Cork
because
is
the way they described it, it sounded a lot more like Dingle than West Cork.
I had a early Dingle, and it was a little young tasting to me, but I have heard good things about them since.
Yeah, Dingle is making some excellent stuff, especially since Graham Cool came on board as their manager a couple of years ago. The bottlings have been really, really outstanding in the last couple of years. And for those who are just joining us, my guests are Becky Paskin from Our Whisky, cocktail and spirits writer Camper English, and Scott Brunow from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And we did have a question, Becky. We addressed the future of Our Whisky off the top, so anybody that wants to know about that jumped in late, I'd encourage people to go back and watch the replay of this once we're done, or listen to the podcast version. But tell us more about that subscription club that you're doing for the UK only.
Sure. I mean, it's for the UK for now. It's funny because since announcing it, and even with the last couple of years with the festival, there's been a lot of interest from the US and Canada and Australia particularly. So you never know, we may branch out at some point. But for now, in the UK, Our Whisky is relaunching as a subscription club and an education platform. And the whole idea is to really make whiskey accessible and fun, and just to help you learn more about whiskey and discover your palate. So maybe the people watching this already understand what they like about whiskey, but we'll be really showcasing different styles of whiskey from around the world in monthly tastings. So for as little as £14 a month, don't know what that is in dollars. I'm not going to bother doing the conversion, I'm afraid. But for £14 a month, you get 2 50ml bottles of whiskey sent through your door. It's letterbox size, so it will fit straight through your letterbox. And we'll have a live virtual tasting with the whiskey makers themselves. We'll be going through what those whiskies are. There's enough in those bottles to either share with your partner or a friend, or even to just save a bit and then create a cocktail out of. So every whiskey will come with cocktail suggestions, a little piece about the whiskey, the distillery, the people who've made it as well. So you've got all the information there at your fingertips. Membership is just £14 a month. And we will also be creating, every few months, there'll be special events that we'll put on. So if anybody joined the Our Whisky Festival events, they're kind of going to go along the same lines. So if anyone was familiar with what we were doing, we just have a little bit of fun with whiskey. So there may be some whiskey and sweet pairing. There may be a blending session with a really big name master blender. There might be a cocktail making session with a amazing bartender. There's lots of different things that we can do with those events, and I'm really looking to the Our Whisky community to help inform those as well. So if there's anything that you would want to see, any kind of event you'd like to attend, then you let us know. They'll mostly be virtual, but we'll be doing some in real life too. And if you're a member of Our Whisky, you'll get a huge discount on those events, as well as massive discounts on tours and tastings and experiences with all of our partners too. So we've got lots coming up. There's a massive lineup of different events and things, and educational resources like interviews and articles and news and all sorts of things. So yeah, really exciting time, and really excited to see how Our Whisky is going to develop over the next few months or so. So the first tasting is on, I'm going to get this right, the first live tasting is on the 28th of April. The cut-off date for subscriptions is the 7th of April. So if you wanted to get involved, then sign up then. And the website is just ourwhisky.com.
Scott, for those who are not familiar with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, give us the basic background on the society. I'm sure most of our listeners and viewers are familiar, but just in case.
Yeah, so the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, of course, I'm in the States. Separate chapter from the UK. I mean, we're all under the purview of the UK, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. You know, it started in Scotland in the 80s. Pip Hills and a couple of his buddies went to distillery number 1, which is known as Glenfarclas, and they said, we want to buy a cask of whiskey. And pretty much unknown at the time, people hadn't been doing that, and they sold them a cask of whiskey. They went back and started sharing it with some friends, and they said, hey, we want to get in on that the next time you do that. And so it just grew and grew. It's branched out. I know we've got branches in Australia, Canada, here in the States. But I think we're around 30,000 members or so plus now worldwide. And it's really growing. It is a society. It's a membership. There's an annual fee. In the States, at least it's $99 for the first year and then $70 after that to remain a member. So, yeah, I mean, it's going good.
Camper, I want to bring you back into the discussion to talk about the book a little bit without going into a lot of the details on it. But if you remember back during Prohibition times, doctors used to write prescriptions for whiskey all the time.
They sure did. And that was one of the only ways to actually get quality whiskey is to have it be prescribed, because that was essentially bottled and bond whiskey that was initially distilled pre-Prohibition, but then they ran out of whiskey and allowed some distillers to distill again towards the later part of Prohibition. And it was thought at the time that the older the whiskey was, the more healthy it was for you. And so everyone specified old whiskey, aged whiskey on the bottles to indicate its quality and its healthfulness. So that was pretty unique. You could also get other spirits. Cognac was imported specifically to be medicinal, and then things like Fernet Branca was allowed to be sold medicinally, and it's always tasted that way. So it's
same for Lafroig.
Yes, exactly. It's a Band-Aid in every bottle. And it was the contrast between the safe but sort of scammy whiskey that you have to lie to get it was interesting against all of the fake whiskey or the denatured whiskey that the bootleggers would sell to consumers to for the speakeasies or whatever for people to drink. There was so much poison whiskey that it was unsafe. And we all know about the lead and the solder and the car radiators used in moonshining and all of that bad for you whiskey. And the prescription is good for you whiskey that you could get from your doctor or your veterinarian.
In case your dog needed a shot, right?
In case your dog was sick.
And I should have remembered this earlier, but this Old Forester is quite appropriate while we're having this discussion because George Garvin Brown named it after Dr. Andrew Forester, who was a well-known doctor of the day, and named it specifically Old Forester because of Dr. Forester's reputation as a healer.
It's really amazing how many products came from doctors, not all just named for them, but some by them, particularly most surviving soda brands that we know today. Those came from pharmacists, in particular because the pharmacy was the soda fountain and they would add their own custom syrup to it. The prehistory of Coca-Cola being a cocaine-loaded wine, and then the non-alcoholic version of that was basically the sodas that we know today. Eventually, soon after it was launched, the cocaine was taken out of the recipe, but they all have that roots to the pharmacy and pharmacists. Dr. Pepper, things like that. They all come from pharmacists making syrups.
And the snake oil salesmen of the day were basically selling alcohol as a tonic back in the day, right?
Yep. Whether it was teething medicine for children that was mostly alcohol, or the snake oil, which didn't really have snake in it. It turns out the famous case was that a snake oil medicine, the guy did a demo at a World's Fair where he boiled a rattlesnake, which sounds smelly. And but then later the U.S. government analyzed the snake oil and found that there was no actual snake in it. And but that's where we got the expression snake oil salesman for shysters selling not real medicine. That was usually mostly, it did make you feel better, but that was usually the alcohol in it.
We have a question for you, Scott, from Graham Fraser. Is the whiskey available to the Scotch Malt Whisky Society members in the U.S. always different to what they get in the U.K.?
Yeah, there are. We do share a lot of casks. if the UK gets a cask and say there's 220, bottles in it, if they share it with us, maybe 60 to 80 of them come to the States. There will be some casks that are U.S. exclusives, and then, some casks remain UK exclusives. And I would imagine, probably maybe Australia or Canada get their own exclusives as well. So it's not guaranteed, but I think probably more than 50% of them are shared, are available in both. But the UK ones will usually hit the market there several months before they're released in the US, just because of the boat ride across the ocean and waiting on tariffs and import taxes to be paid.
And just because they're already starting out in the UK.
Right. Yeah.
Becky, what have you tasted recently that's impressed you from new distilleries?
Oh, good question. We've got a lot of new distilleries in the UK, particularly in England. One that's really surprised me, well, not surprised me because I wouldn't have had any clue what they tasted like before because it was their first release, is Wireworks whiskey from White Peak Distillery, and it's in Derbyshire in England. And they have set up in an old wire factory, hence Wireworks. Really delicious whiskey. They've been making rum amongst other spirits. So they have created their whiskey using a beer yeast that they've sourced from a local brewery nearby. And their whiskey is really light and fruity. They've taken inspiration from a lot of the work that Dr. Jim Swan had been doing. So lots of STR casks, really light, fruity style of new make, but with that beer yeast element. So I find there's a little bit of bready maltiness, but with a bit of springy hoppiness to it as well. They're maturing that whiskey in STR casks, so shaved, toasted, recharred. And they're also maturing it in their old rum casks because they're making rum as well. So it's a really multifaceted operation, and everything is done on site. It's a husband and wife team, Max and Claire Vaughan. Max is running the distilling side. Claire is running everything else. She even designed the bottle and the packaging, which is amazing. So yeah, they are fantastic. I continue to really love the new whiskies that come out of the Lakes distillery as well. So I'm sticking in England. So some of the whiskies that are made by Davil Gandhi, who has now recently gone freelance. He's a consultant blender, consultant whiskey maker, but his whiskies are phenomenal, and he has draws on all of his experience from working with Macallan, has a very sherried emphasis on a lot of the whiskies he makes, and he's really drawing on what I like to call social terroir, so really thinking about his own experiences and creating a whiskey that's a reflection of his personality, his experiences, growing up in India, his mother and his grandmother's influence, and just creating whiskies that are a reflection of that. I think that's just such a lovely facet of whiskey. Sorry, I just saw this question. Does one have to drink English whiskey from a teacup? Yes. With your pinky in the air as well, you have to, and with a saucer. That's. I don't have a teacup and saucer just now. That's why I'm drinking Scotch out of a tumbler like this. You won't on the cup and tumbler topic though. You will not believe the amount of crap that I get for not drinking out of a Glencairn, because I noticed you are all drinking out of Glencairns, and I don't prefer to.
I'm drinking out of a Tuath.
What's a Tuath?
It's got the triangular shaped bottom.
It's Irish whiskey.
Irish glass.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I'm in a tumbler, and it's my preferred glass. But you would not believe the amount of trolling that I get about my glassware.
And I was drinking the old fashioned out of this tumbler. So there.
At home, I'm mostly a single old-fashioned glass is how I drink my whiskey most often. But Glencairns just come in the mail, right?
Yeah,
for media.
Sorry.
Tyrone missed me at first, though. I did have my teacup out at first, so he wasn't here.
No, we know you had whiskey in there, Scott.
Tea mug. I can't confirm nor deny what was in it.
Tumblers are fine. It's whatever you like. So, Camper, what have you tried recently that's impressed you in the whiskey world?
Well, I am just about to try so many whiskeys that I can't even think about the past. I'm about to start judging the San Francisco World Spirits Competition starting next week. And this year, rather than a big weekend of judging, it's 2 weeks of judging, but more space between the tables, I guess, due to the pandemic. So I am going to have so much delicious whiskey and other spirits, but I'm not going to know what any of it is because it's a blind tasting.
How do you prepare for a whiskey judging?
I try to take it easy on my body generally, not over drink before, not going to show up hungover or anything like that. I like to have a full stomach long before I get to the judging and be well hydrated. I drink ridiculous amounts of water anyway, so that's not usually a problem. And then we just go. It's good because you're at a table with several other people and you give your individual scores and you come together and decide what the medal or no medal is for the table, which I like a lot better than doing that alone and then submitting it to the internet and seeing what happens, because we might talk and oh, but there's that weird plastic note in there. You're like, oh, now I see it. Yeah, but I like it. And we'd have those conversations, which are great, particularly because some of the other judges in the room are very knowledgeable. They may be blenders and marketers, and they'll know the history of the juice so well that they sort of know what it is, even though we haven't been told. And it's really cool to learn from the other judges in the tasting.
So, Scott, what have you tasted recently that's impressed you that's not from the society?
I knew that was coming around to me, and I've been looking, scanning. I was that's a good question. I'm loving some of the Billy Walker stuff from Glenallachie that's been being put out. I think he's doing a good job there. Other than that, I just can't think of anything really that stood out. I even looked to my list to see what Bart and I with the Scotch Test Dummies have reviewed recently.
That brings up a good question from Tyrone Coty in Nova Scotia. With your new focus on the society, are you still going to have time for the Scotch Test Dummies?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have been so far, chugging right along. So we started the Dummies in 2013, so we've been a little over 8 years now with that. Doing 2 reviews a week. Saturdays, we try to do a world whiskey. It started was just Scotch, and we've branched out, of course, with Australian whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Indian whiskey. On Saturdays, Wednesdays, we stick to an American, or we try to stick to American whiskeys or bourbons. We went a couple of months without reviewing a bourbon, and we were reviewing Scotches just because this whole bourbon craze, we can't even get our hands on stuff to review for the most part. And there hasn't been too much, new stuff coming out that's been, worthy of reviewing. So I think we went 2 months where we didn't even review any American whiskeys, which was kind of a bummer, but a sign of the times, I guess.
Question from Dave Kuhn, and I'm going to rephrase this. What is the most complicated cocktail and why does it suck? Camper, I'm going to rephrase the question. What's the cocktail that bartenders hate to get an order for?
Well, depending on, sometimes you're prepped and ready to make a Ramos Gin Fizz, and sometimes you're not. The general, we could call it a policy, is that if it's not on the menu, you typically don't get a Bloody Mary at nighttime, or you don't ask for a Ramos Gin Fizz because that requires a lot of heavy shaking because it has egg white in it. If it's not on the menu, you should consider whether you want to put the bartender through that. However, if there are other egg white drinks on the menu, then they're prepared to shake hard and do the work. Oh, we have a visitor, a cat at Becky's computer. But that's the ones that people sometimes complain about. But it's more, if those are on the menu, you're good to go. Absolutely 100%. Like, it doesn't really matter if the bartender cares or not. They've signed up. That's their job. I don't like doing invoicing, but I have to do it as well. The complicated cocktails are, a lot of bars now are taking shortcuts. They'll do partial batching of some of the ingredients. If that drink is on the menu and it has 7 ingredients, maybe there are 5 of them together in a batch so that they only had to add fresh citrus juice and bitters before shaking, for example. And that makes faster drinks for everybody as well. So they figured out some shortcuts.
I can't even imagine what this cocktail is from H. Hemphill, the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. I don't even want to know what that one is.
Sounds
As
delicious.
Becky's cat Isla is making an appearance right now.
Of course, she had to. You knew it was coming, Mark.
Oh, of course.
She
be told I had one of the cats crawling up my leg behind the table here when, and I'm
say hi.
People are making comments about. I'm going. Wait a second. How did you see my cat? She's not even up. He's not even up here yet.
Hello. Hello.
She heard Becky was using a mouse.
Oh, that's such a poor joke. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
That's a dad joke, Scott.
Sorry, can't resist.
She can't help it whenever the camera's on. If I'm sat here not directing my attention at her, she's like straight in the view of camera, like, love me. Give me attention.
We all want to be famous. I don't blame her.
I tell you what, when long time ago, actually, Camper went on the subject of cocktails that bartenders hate to make. When I was a bartender in the early noughties, it was a late night in a bar when a drunk person would come up and ask for 10 mojitos would be the killer. You really didn't want to have to make 10 mojitos when you're 3 people deep at the bar. But that's what you would have to do. The other one, which I hate, is obviously, it's not just the cocktails, it's the ordering one drink at a time and then ordering the Guinness at the end. It's just the worst. Or the five Guinnesses at the end, but constantly turning around to ask somebody else what they want. It's like, come to the bar with your order. Just understand what you want to say.
Yeah, show up ready. Sometimes I'll order a beer for now while you're making the cocktail that I'm ordering. Whoever's in a can.
And it's only polite to say, I'll have 5. If you're ordering 10 mojitos, say, I'll have 10 mojitos and 1 for you. That's a nice thing to do.
Scott, I know you've never done any of this because you've not worked as a bartender, right?
No. And I'm the just give me a Macallan 12 neat guy at the bar. It depends on the selection, of course. Usually it's like, just, what do you got? Macallan 12 neat.
And I'm absolutely the person I want the thing that has, ice stalagmites and lasers shooting out of it and a mountain of garnish. Like, I just want the biggest, most ridiculous. I want it to taste good, hopefully, but I like some razzle dazzle in my cocktails, and I cannot lie.
Although I would suspect that if one has developed a reputation for tipping heavily, the bartender will make whatever that person wants.
Well, hopefully they'll treat everyone equally, whether they tip well or not. In a perfect world that I'll pretend exists for just this moment.
There's no such thing as a perfect world. You know that, Camper. What else are you working on these days besides the book? Now that you've got the book out, what else are you working on?
Oh, well, I am still finishing the edits of the book, which I will go back to right after this talk. The final, supposedly, edits, working from the PDF files there. Then I'm sort of researching next books and looking at more journalism stuff to do, trend stories, what flavors are popular now. Does everyone want cream drinks now, safety and comfort drinks now that we're out of the pandemic? Or is dance music more important at cocktail bars because people are finally able to see each other again? The big questions, important things. Nothing else going on, so that's what we talk about.
What can people find at alcademics.com?
Well, Alcademics has like 15 years worth of me being a nerd about cocktails and spirits. So the big thing that I'm known for is ice, and I figured out a way to make clear ice cubes that's used all over the world now, which is just about sticking a cooler into your freezer. It's not terribly complicated, but it took me a while to figure it out a decade ago. And so that's why a lot of people come to the website. But I've been fortunate to travel a lot and visit a lot of distilleries, and I think most of us here are that person on the tour where you're like, just one more question, like how many microns was that filter? And I put that all down on the blog over all these years, and they're all still there. So it's nerdy stuff about everything, but that's ice is the big one. I do have two other websites. One is Cocktail Green, and that has sustainability tips, mostly taken from other bartenders with credit, of course, to share those tips. And then Cocktail Safe is about some problematic ingredients that are being used in drinks these days and why they might best be avoided, such as homemade tonic water after a certain point is not a great idea. Activated charcoal makes drinks cool looking and goth and black, but could deactivate any medicine in your system that you have taken. So not a great idea to combine, usually inert on its own. Stuff like that. Edible flowers. Because of Instagram, everybody in Los Angeles is walking around picking flowers off of street trees next to the highway and putting them in their cocktail on Instagram. And it's like, oh, yes, the deadly camellia rose, that you should not drink that now because no one's paying attention. So information like that gets on cocktailsafe.org.
The thinning of the herd continues.
I would say about a month ago, I was out at a restaurant and with supper, of course, it was from the menu, but they had a barrel-aged margaritas. And they had taken, I think it was the mezcal and the triple sec, if I remember right, and they had barrel-aged it in-house for 30 days or 60 days or something prior to making the margarita. And it was pretty tasty. I liked it.
I'm glad to hear it wasn't the lime.
Well, we have managed to kill an hour that you guys are never going to get back. So I want to thank our guests, Becky Paskin from ourwhisky.com, Camper English from ouracademics.com, Scott Brunow from Scotch Test Dummies and the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Thank you guys for giving us an hour of your time tonight. And thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it, and we will see you next week. That's our Happy Hour live webcast from the other night, March 18th, 2022, with Becky Paskin, Scott Brunow, and Camper English. If you have comments on this or any of our podcasts, just track me down on social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WhiskeyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Once again, thanks to our presenting sponsors, Dewar's and Redbreast, for their support, along with the segment sponsors on our flagship WhiskeyCast podcast each week, Writer's Tears, Scarabus, Sagamore Spirit, Mortlock, The Delmore, and Catoctin Creek. WhiskeyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.